Hello, and welcome to the Table and Well podcast. I'm Tennison.
And I'm Ginelle. Thank you for joining us as we discuss topics and give practical tools that help you live, grow, and be in healthy, joy-filled relationship with God, yourself, and others.
For more information and resources, or if you're looking for coaching, connection, and community, visit tableandwell.org. We hope you enjoy this podcast. Are you a parent longing to reconnect with your adult children? Or maybe an adult child hoping to rebuild connection with your parents? Have you felt the gap between you growing and you're not sure how to bridge it? Or perhaps you just want to deepen the safety and connection that already exist in your family? What if I told you learning 12 key relational skills could do all this and more? Relational Collabs is Table and Well's 12-week online signature training where you will gain practical tools proven to heal, transform, and deepen your connection with God, yourself, and those you love the most. It's never too late to rewrite your relational story, to rebuild trust, to create authentic connection, and to experience real joy in your relationships. Our winter semester starts Monday, January 13th at 8 p.m. and registration is open now. Take your first step towards deeper, healthier, and more meaningful relationships your heart has longed for. Visit tableandwell.org/collabs to join today. Table and Well, transforming relational stories, one parent, one child, one family at a time.
I'm curious around people who are in the elder stage that have counted themselves out. Like, I know an elder who she's just ready to quote unquote go home because she has lots of pain in her family, but she's such a gem, but she doesn't quite have a space to be that gem. Or the couple that I saw yesterday eating lunch that is in their elder stage, but you could tell they weren't, I don't know, like they're missing their place. There just wasn't purpose. Like they were just buying time. Do you have anything to say to those people, or what might the invitation be from us as people in the community who understand just how important they are?
Yeah. So I think that what I just said about being seen and heard goes both directions. And people who are usually people who are ready to check out, it's because they feel like they themselves have become the burden, and that rather than being someone who can help others carry their burdens, they have now become the burden that needs to be helped and need to be carried. And it's just overwhelming to them to think that they're in that position. And as a result, they need people, but they need people to see them and notice them and appreciate them. And so some of this, there's some things they can do for themselves, but there's also people not giving them value based on how productive they're able to be, but just that they are valuable enough to spend time with.
Yeah.
And I do think that that's a large part of the problem. But what's interesting, I saw a statistic the other day that said 41% of boomers are lonely, but 78% of Gen Z are lonely.
Wow.
And the what I find interesting about that is that the things are connected. I think they're connected in terms of the breakdown of community, the breakdown of multi-generational community. You know, one of the things that I got to experience when I was in my youth pastor kind of days, I was never technically the youth pastor, but I was functionally the youth pastor at my church. And we had 120 kids in our youth group.
Wow.
And we had so I was the pastoral intern. I was doing an internship, and we put together a team of parents for the junior high and a team of parents for the senior high. And I had the parents set the agenda and host everything. And so everything was happening in somebody's home for the most part. And whenever we went anywhere, there were going to be 6 parents going along with us wherever we went. And what happened as a result was there was a strong sense of multi-generational connection there. I didn't even know about that idea at that point in my life, but it created this sense of I have a sense of connection with another generation in this church and not just my own generation, because a lot of those kids, what they did is they wouldn't talk to their own parents,
Hmm.
but they loved the opportunity to talk to somebody else's parent.
Yeah.
And it was a really good thing. It made for a really strong group. And we look back, and I think something like 35 of those kids went into full-time Christian ministry.
Wow.
And some of that is just they came from good homes, and some of it is but I've had a lot of people say they look back at that sort of the golden age of their, Christian
Hmm.
experience, because there was so much joy in this group. And I do think that, sticking on the high school theme for a minute, was I get asked a lot, what do we got to do to keep young people from leaving the church? And the typical answer is better apologetics or a more exciting program. And I've always tell them the same thing. No, it's belonging. I said, what happens
Yes.
is a lot of these kids only form belonging with their peers at the church.
Yep.
And so when they go off to college and they come back, they don't see anybody at the church that they know. They don't feel any sense of belonging with them. This is not their people. Their
Hmm.
people were the kids. And so if we don't find a way to bridge that and to get other generations more actively involved in our children's and youth ministries and our churches, that's not going to change. Um, but I know for myself, there were 6, 7 families in the church where I could go and have a conversation with somebody else's parents.
Yeah.
And they weren't all equally deep, but I knew there were people I could talk to about stuff going on in my life. That creates bonding,
Yeah.
not, to the church as a whole and not just to your peer group within the youth.
Right. And then when you return from college, those faces are there to greet you.
Yep.
Even if the
Exactly.
young adults have moved on or the kids from the youth group have moved on, their parents are still there.
Yep. And there's
Yeah.
people who are happy to see you, who know your story, and
Mhm.
Right.
you know, it makes it easier to stay. And then and there are, I've also noticed this, like there are cultures that prioritize keeping family together in the same community. It's like you see that a lot in, well, the internationals who move to the United States, and
Yeah.
they keep together. They don't spread all over the place. I've got a relative who married into a Catholic family, and I noticed one of the things in their family was like all of the brothers and sisters live within an hour and a half of each other still to this day, right? Their kids are growing up and they don't want to move; they want to stay in the area, and so. What happens now is there are birthdays constantly, there are weddings constantly, there are holidays
Mhm.
constantly. There are all these reasons for multi generations to get together and do things socially. And that builds a sense of, I don't want to lose this. I don't want to leave that. And I think that the
Right.
church can learn a big lesson from this.
Yeah.
Like we, um, we have to find ways to create those social connections for people that say, I love these social connections. I have so much joy when I'm connecting with these people. I don't want to lose that. And that's a big part of it.
Yeah. That's really good. It kind of reminds me of a story where our son and daughter-in-law went to they went to a Greek wedding. They
Yeah.
had a friend.
Big fat one, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They had a friend. She was getting married, and she was Greek, and the guy was not Greek. But when the wedding came, he was, and actually before the wedding, actually, I'm trying to remember the story right. But what our daughter-in-law was telling us was that, like, all of the extended family, the church community, all knew this young man. Like he wasn't Greek, but when he showed up, like everyone knew who he was. They knew his name, and they like welcomed him in to this community of their Greek community, and to where he knew he belonged there. Like I mean, unless something obviously, hey, marriage is marriage and things happen, but for that moment, as they were watching this, they're like, this was just, it was unbelievable because everybody knew him, they welcomed him in, and it was a big party. The community came and literally celebrated.
Yeah, and the community worked to like make him a part
Yeah.
of their community. Like they found that to be part of their job, not just like, oh, that's nice you picked that guy and we'll show up to celebrate that one day or those few hours, but like it was, I think, months and months
Months
in
and
the
months and months.
making. So
Yeah.
when the wedding came, it wasn't some guy on an altar, it was there.
It was their guy.
It was one
Yeah,
of
no, it
them.
makes so much sense too, because, for most cultures throughout history, the wedding wasn't about a couple. It was about bringing a new family into the community.
Yes.
Mhm.
Right. And so there was a reason why the whole community was there, and weddings lasted 7 days, and, they would go, and it was a sense of, you are now taking your place in our community as one of the families in our community.
Yeah.
We've lost that completely, right, in America, and part of it is, America has become so cash based. Like, it's like we just go where the money is, and so I move to where I can make money, and I prioritize that over being where I can be around family and I can keep these kind of connections going. And so I travel all over the place, and there's nothing wrong with travel and moving on. I mean, but it does come with a price, and it does come with a toll. So my own family very much fit into that category of not really building that kind of belonging connection, the one I grew up in. My eldest sister lived in Brazil most of my life. My brother moved out when he was 18, and I didn't see him till he was 25. Right. My sister closest, I'm the baby of the family, right? So the youngest sister, closest to me in age, uh, um, it is a hard thing when the baby becomes an elder too. Let me tell you. So when she got married young, age 19, right? And so she's just sort of disappeared. And I tell people constantly, it's like my family feels like islands, and we all get along and we like each other. We just don't, but our lives don't intertwine.
Yeah.
And I look at that as the distinction between that and what you're describing with like this Greek community, and what you're describing with the people where there's no such thing as being an island, right? We do these things together. And when you don't have that, you don't know it's not normal. But when you see it and when you experience it, you don't want to live without it.
Yeah.
And
And isn't that what we all long for?
Yes.
It's like, even we were watching a cheesy Hallmark movie with our son and his wife, and she just loves cheesy Hallmark movies, but it's about going home to the community. And there's so many aspects of that our hearts long for when we see it played out. But we feel like we've lost our way to do that. We've talked about the cash issue too with us personally, and community, of like, we don't actually need each other anymore, quote unquote, in the way that like, if I need, for instance, we needed our front landscaping bed done. And I don't know, I researched, I'm like, I don't know what to plant here that's going to survive. And so I thought around all the people that I might know, and I couldn't come up with anyone that would probably be willing to give me a weekend to figure it out together. And so it was like, well, I guess I'll just pay somebody to do it. And that's kind of what we've come to, I think, in America as well, of like, I have a need that really belongs to do together in community, whatever that might look like. And we end up buying it instead.
Yeah,
absolutely. And, I was one of those who, it never even occurred to me to ask somebody to help with those things, partly because of the sort of family I was in. I always just paid to have it done or tried to figure it out myself. And I mentioned a relative who married into a Catholic family. Well, the guy from that family, completely different thing. He was appalled that I was doing all these things by myself. Thing, and he was like, "I'm coming over." I was like, "We're gonna get this done." And he and at first I was like, "Why are you here?" But then it was. But it's been several years now, and I'm like, it's just really nice to know that when something goes wrong, you're not alone with that, right?
Yeah.
There are people who's like, oh, we can't let that keep being broken. Let's find somebody in the family who's good at that, and we'll get that taken care of for you. It really is, especially when you connect this to trauma and the idea that suffering becomes trauma when I feel all alone in it.
Yes.
And one of the things that we're struggling here is that the failure to build communities that are elders, that have a lot of elders that are by having elders, you're automatically multi-generational unless you just moved into a retirement home. And so it's that kind of community helps you not to have to go through anything alone.
Yeah.
And it minimizes the level of trauma unless, right, it's a community that's keeping secrets. Now, I do know some places that are actually really strong on multi-generational, but they are full of incest and they're full of all kinds of family secrets. And it looks wonderful from the outside, but it is not a place you want to be.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So we have to understand the boundaries and the limits of this too, because what I would look at is, in rare leadership, one of the things we say is that the most powerful transformational engine of the world is identity and belonging, right? When you take belonging plus identity equals transformation. Well, the problem with that is that it works for good and for evil.
Yes.
Right. That's why the mafia is as bonded as anybody, right? And a lot of them don't actually think they're doing anything wrong because they're just looking out for the family kind of thing. It's so you can get people who are highly bonded together and they got all this multi-generational thing, but it isn't a joyful place. It is a scary place. And so I just want to point that out. Like, this isn't a panacea for all of the problems anywhere. It becomes like a panacea when it is combined with true biblical values of how we live life and how we treat other people.
Yeah. What you're saying is, and we've talked about this too a lot, and I'm sure you agree with this. It's are you living from a place of love and joy, or are you living from a place of fear and shame, and depending on what the prevailing motivation is determines that.
Yeah, Jim talked about that on the podcast as well. He's like, elders are amazing unless they're fear-based elders. Then they're one of the worst things you could have.
Honestly, I was not that long ago. I was in doing a little bit of consulting, and their number one question was, what do we do with all the incest in our community? I mean, it's not something you expect to see because, again, from the outside, this just looked like the picture postcard of multi-generational community.
Yeah.
And so that's why I just would put the caveat on it. And I agree with Jim completely. It's like, if this is a joy-based community, it's the most powerful thing in the world for creating resilient people. But if it is a fear-based, secret-keeping, community, it's a recipe for destroying lives and traumatizing people. And at a level, you can't get to that level of trauma without all of the secrecy and all of the. So it amplifies the problem. Now, also tell people that nobody is perfectly joy motivated with no fear at all. So what we're looking for here is, when I find myself fear motivated, I just want to find a joy motivation to do the same thing. It's not that I eliminate the fear in it. I tell people this in leadership all the time, and I have to deal with it even in a deeper walk. And that is, you got to make decisions, and you can go with the decision of, man, we've got a huge budget this year. How in the world are we going to raise this much money? And you can make all of your decisions on, well, if we don't do this, we aren't going to get in the money. And if we don't do that, we won't be able to pay staff. And then I'm going to have to lay people off. And then we're going to, and this whole thing could just blow up and be gone next year. You can motivate yourself with fear and everything that you do. But if that is, so you've got to, and that stuff tends to come pretty easily. So you have to make yourself stop and think. And this is one of the things that elders should be helpful in doing is, well, let's stop and let's recalibrate and let's think about what's the joyful motivation for doing this? Because we may do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
But we are going to be doing it from a place of, well, it would be so great if this happened, and this is what we're really trying to accomplish, and this is our kingdom purpose, and this is all the other stuff. And so you tend to get communities that swing one direction or the other, and that is, they're so almost head in the clouds, kind of like, oh, everything's going to be perfect. God will always supply abundance. No bad thing ever happens. No weapon formed against you means nothing bad will ever happen. It's like there's a And then you get people the other way, and it's like, no, this is you're not seeing how bad the problem is here. You're not seeing how big this issue is. And so sometimes both of these things are true simultaneously. It's like this is both potentially catastrophic and potentially a great opportunity. And you have to, so it does take a little bit of, how do I find the joy in, while being honest about the fear and what there is to be concerned about, finding the joy that there is in there to motivate what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And I think the role of the elders in that space is they've got history and they've walked through it and probably have done it both ways and seen how it's turned out both ways and what's happened internally both ways. And so they're able to come in and create the balance to help us focus back into, no, we're doing it for this reason. And this is what is going to produce the best result physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, is if we approach it this way, and instilling that into a community, I think would be where the elders would actually be very helpful, because, especially when like Ginelle and I, we're in this thing and we're doing it, and we're our own sounding board. So we like, if it starts off bad, it just gets worse because we're our own sounding board. There's no outside voice coming in saying, oh, wait. It's not as bad as you think it is. And so I think,
or just to give that joy-filled perspective when we lose it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And there's also a role for like somebody like me coming in as an outsider and giving observations, but it doesn't replace the need for the inside voices who have that experience. And, I know one of the things that happens is when you do a lot of public speaking, people come up and they want a 5-minute counseling session in the aisle between sessions, right? It's like, hey, here's what's going on in my life. Tell me what to do, right. And like, everything, don't you? And I'm like, and so you're like, and it's like you want to be helpful, but you also know there's no way you're going to get enough context, and there's no way you're going to get enough to give them something definitive. So you end up, pointing them to resources and things of the nature. But it's why there's a need, though. I think one of the reasons so many people are so desperate, like at some of these conferences, to be able to talk to someone, is that they don't have people like that in their community. Yeah. They don't have, they feel all alone with this. And that's a difficult thing to get through. I also think it's why, some of the poorest cultures in the world have some of the most joyful people, because what they lack in resources they have in relationships, and they know they're never going through anything alone. It's not that they don't suffer, and it's not that they don't cry and don't have hardship, but there's another level of resilience. And it's not universally happen just because you're poor. It happens, right? Some of those places are worse, absolutely, because they don't have either. They don't have joy and they don't have money, right? So there's but I met a guy who worked in the slums of South Africa, and the toll of being in that environment was destroying their marriage. It was destroying their ministry. They were about done when they came across, the book Chris Corsi and I wrote on 4 Habits of Joy-Filled Marriages. Mm-hmm. And they started doing the exercises, and 2 weeks into it, they were like, why were we ever thinking of getting divorced, right? It's like, why were we ever even considering this? We actually like being together. And there's like this light went on that said, wow, if we could build our ministry around joy, and our family around joy, what would change? And since then, they've been in connection a few times, and they said they've now seen over 30 young people come to Christ from this impoverished village they work in. They've are now starting a church from all of the people who are beginning to come to Christ. These kids don't have joy in their families. Many of their families are abusive, but they're finding joy in their community together. Yeah. And it's kind of, you realize, okay, so this is what the church could be, right? We could be that safe joy place in people's lives. And wouldn't that be awesome?
You've been listening to the Table and Well podcast. New episodes stream every Tuesday. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review to let us know. Also, subscribe on your favorite listening platform to stay up to date on all things Table and Well. To learn more, start your journey, or get information on how Table and Well can help develop your community, family, or teams to be relationally healthy and authentically connected, please go to tableandwell.org/collab to schedule an interest call, or you can email us directly at known@tableandwell.org.